Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the endless sand, the kind that grits between your teeth and sifts into your socks, no matter how tightly you tie them. You're not just walking through a desert, you're entering one of history's best kept secrets. The stars above you glitter like spilled salt, the moon's hanging low and golden like a half-melted coin, and ahead, somewhere past the dunes, lies a kingdom where people once traded gold for salt without speaking a single word. And here's your reality check. If you got lost out here with no map, no GPS, no guide, well, let's just say your chances of making it back are roughly equal to those of a snowball surviving in a tagine pot. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. I've read every single one. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the Sahara by night when the air drops low enough to bite but not broil. It's quieter than you expected, no cars, no chatter, not even the sound of your own breath, because somehow you've learned to hold it. The dunes stretch in rolling silence, broken only by the steady plodding of camel hooves and the creak of their wooden saddles. You feel like you're walking through time, not space. Around you, a caravan moves slowly, figures wrapped in indigo cloth, their faces mostly hidden voices held back like they're saving breath for something sacred. There's no GPS here, just stars and memory. And ahead, a destination you can't yet see, but can somehow feel. The wind picks up a soft sweep across the face of the desert. It smells like old stone, and something faintly sweet dates maybe crushed in a saddlebag hours ago. In the distance, a faint glow begins to rise, not from a fire, but from the moonlight, catching the first stones of a settlement. You blink and it's there, a city made of earth sand-colored walls, rising like mirages but holding their shape. This is where the story begins. Not in Europe, not in some grand palace, but in the ancient west of Africa. Ghana, though the people called it Ouagadougou, a name half lost to time but still whispered by griots and traced into the bones of ruins. You're not here for monuments, you're here for salt and gold, because long before Bitcoin, before banking apps, before Wall Street or the euro or even the first minted coin, humans were making trades, not for luxury, for survival. And the most famous trade in early African history was salt for gold. Silent, equal, sacred. You step into the edge of an old marketplace now buried under sand. You can barely make out the outlines, but the energy lingers. This was where deals were made with no haggling, no shouting, no aggressive bargaining. Traders came from the north with blocks of salt cut clean from the desert floor. Traders from the south brought gold dust stored in pouches of leather or gourds sealed with wax. But here's the twist: they never spoke. Not a word. The northern traders would arrive, first lay out their salt and back away. Then the southerners would come examine the offering, and if they found it fair, leave gold beside it. If not, they walked away. Maybe they'd return with less gold, maybe more. But always the exchange was made in utter silence. It's called silent barter. And while historians still argue whether it was invented for spiritual reasons, practical ones, or just plain distrust, it worked for centuries. And you right now are sitting where it happened. You crouch in the sand and pick up a flat shard of rock. Maybe it was once part of a building. Maybe a trader rested on it weighing salt against gold. You can almost see them, silent, steady, eyes meeting only briefly, hands gesturing without words. It's a kind of communication we modern folk aren't used to. No phone screens, no price tags, no angry Yelp reviews. And yet, somehow there was quick trust. Here's a fun tidbit to tuck under your pillow. Some accounts claim that if a trader tried to cheat if he took the gold and left nothing, or brought poor quality salt, the spirits of the market would curse his caravan. Lost wheels, sick camels, stolen cargo. Whether you believe in curses or not, the message was clear. Silence demanded honesty. The wind kicks up again, swirling fine sand around your ankles. You pull your robe tighter, mimicking the figures of old. Maybe it's just your imaginations, but you feel watched not by ghosts or spirits, but by the weight of history, like the dunes themselves remember. And speaking of memory, historians today still debate exactly how widespread this trade practice was. Was it unique to Ghana? Did the Berbers and the Soninke invent it together, or borrow it from earlier Saharan tribes? There's no one answer. The records we have are fragments scribbled in the margins of travelers' logs buried in oral tradition. The silence itself makes the truth slippery, but maybe that's what makes it beautiful. A trade with no words, a kingdom with no written constitution, a power that moved gold and salt across a continent in silence. The fire behind you crackles softly, though you don't remember lighting one. Your caravan settles in. A camel snorts in the dark. The stars overhead seem to shift, not twinkle, as if guiding you toward the next layer of the story. A deeper silence, a heavier gold, and tomorrow you'll see where it all began. The morning heat rises before the sun does. You wake to a sky slowly leaking light, soft pinks giving way to warm ochres. The sand is cool under your feet, but not for long. You stand stretch, and the horizon yawns before you like a sleeping lion's mouth. This is the edge of Ouagadougou, the ancient kingdom of Ghana. And no, not the modern-day country hugging the Gulf of Guinea. That's a namesake. The real Ghana. It was here, inland, older, dustier, wealthier. You walk past low stone foundations, barely peeking above the soil, the ghosts of long-crumbled walls. This was once Kumbi Sala, the kingdom's capital, a city with two faces. One side was where the Soninka people lived and ruled. The other, a foreign quarter of Muslim traders, scholars, and merchants all carrying new spices and salt across the Sahara. It's quiet now, but centuries ago this was where we were booming. Imagine walking down its ancient market street. The scent of shea butter, roasted millet, leather tanning in the sun. A griot sits beneath a baobab, plucking his kora, spinning tales of kings so rich they slept under gold-threaded mosquito nets. You pause at a stall where a merchant with gold dust on his fingers hands you a piece of salt wrapped in cloth like it's a diamond. Because it was. Gold was mined in the south, but salt, that came from the north, and it wasn't just a seasoning, it was a life-saving preservative, a currency, a craving. Human bodies need salt to survive, especially when you live in a heat-riddled land where sweat is constant and refrigeration is a distant dream. You begin to understand why this kingdom grew powerful by sitting right between two vital cravings. And Ghana knew how to capitalize. You're led now through the ruins of what once was the Cordoba royal compound. It's hard to picture, but griots say it gleamed. Mud brick walls lined with polished wood ceilings high enough to keep cool air circulating. Courtyards filled with court officials, musicians, and interpreters, because the king, he did not speak to commoners. Not directly. We'll get to that later. The king of Ghana was called the Ghana, a title, not a name, like Caesar or Pharaoh. He ruled with velvet gloves made of iron, gracious, lavish, but unquestioned. Taxes were levied on every grain of gold or pinch of salt that passed through his kingdom, and the taxes were paid in kind. So yes, if you brought gold in, he took a cut. Salt cut. Even donkeys, there was a fee per hoof. It's probably the only kingdom in history to invent a literal donkey tax. You crouch near a half-buried stone that once marked the edge of the market plaza. It's worn smooth, but you can still feel its purpose. Maybe it was a counting stone. Maybe it just marked territory. But it sat in a place where thousands of transactions happened, some loud, some silent. And Ghana was rich. Arab travelers like al-Bakri rode in awe of the kingdom's size and splendor. He described the king's court as dazzling with gold-threaded horses, drums of ivory, and dogs with collars of gold. Now let's be honest, maybe he was embellishing a little. Travel blogs have always added sparkle to dusty places, but still there's a kernel of truth. Ghana controlled the flow of the two most prized commodities in West Africa, and everyone wanted in. But Ghana wasn't just rich in stuff, it was rich in stories. According to oral traditions, the kingdom's origins lie in the tale of the Ouagadougou, a mystical city that sank beneath the earth due to betrayal and greed. Some say it re-emerges every few generations, visible only to those who believe. Fringe tale maybe, but it served a purpose, reminding the people that wealth alone doesn't make a kingdom strong. Loyalty does, trust does, silence does. You hear a whisper wind through grass or memory echoing down the trade road. Either way, you're drawn to the edges of the compound, where the earth turns slightly greener. There's a well here, long dry, but once deep. A place of cool conversation and strategic alliance. And that's the thing, Ghana was a hub, a node, A golden hinge between desert and forest, between Arabic scholars and animist priests, between Islam and ancestral spirits. It didn't need to conquer everything around it. It just needed to sit still and to be in the middle. There's a lesson in that. Historians still argue whether Ghana truly controlled all its supposed territory, or if it was more of a loose network, a collection of vassals and tribute states. The evidence is patchy. Written records came from foreigners. Oral traditions can twist like braided rope. But what's clear is this Ghana held power not through brute force, but through economic gravity. Everyone orbited around it because everyone wanted what it had, and you can feel the echoes beneath your sandals. The morning sun is climbing now, and the city begins to shimmer, ruins coming alive in your imagination. You hear the clink of weights balancing gold dust, the thump of camel hooves, the rustle of parchment. A scribe nearby dips a stylus into ink made from charred acacia pods and writes the day's exchanges in neat Arabic script. And somewhere beyond the horizon, another caravan is already heading your way. They'll arrive in silence. They'll carry salt. And they'll wait for an answer written in gold. You leave the sandy remnants of Kumbi Saleh behind, heading south, toward where the forests begin to thicken and the ground changes, sand giving way to dirt rich with the color of rusted blood. You can smell it before you see it. Humid air, green and loamy, the wet breath of a jungle that's never truly quiet. This is the Jis Gold Zone, the other half of Ghana's silent exchange. And right now, you're walking toward the place where wealth literally seeps from the earth. The jungle hums around you. Cicadas buzz in stereo. Somewhere overhead, monkeys argue in high-pitched yelps. But your attention stays low because you're here to see gold. Not the shiny coins or chains people flex on social media, but raw gold, gritty, powdery, and stubborn. You reach a riverbank, and there they are, workers bent low, hands scooping sediment into wide woven pans. No machines, no drills, just human strength and mud. They swirl the pans with practiced grace, letting water wash away the lighter bits until flecks of gold settle at the bottom, dull, yellowish nothing like treasure until you see it shimmer in the light. The stuff you'd walk past on a hike. Here it's the heartbeat of an empire. This is Bambuk, one of the legendary goldfields. There are others, Bur, Lobi, Galam. But Bambuk gets most of the historical glory. And yes, scholars still debate how tightly Ghana controlled these sites. Did they own them outright, or just tax the caravans that carried the goods? Either way, the flow of gold was constant, and the kingdom was its gatekeeper. Here's the fringe fact of the day. Some legends claim there was gold-eating spirits that protected these sites, guardian creatures that lived underground and would curse anyone who mined too greedily. Sounds wild, but it kept people honest. And it's not so different from modern-day resource taboos where fear and folklore act as environmental checks. You crouch beside a young miner scraping a clump of earth with a flat-bladed stick. He hums a song you don't recognize. It's rhythmic, slow, not for entertainment, but for focus. You realize this whole region works like a machine built on repetition. Dig, pan, sift, pray, repeat. And behind every handful of dirt, someone is hoping for that one speck of brilliance. Gold here isn't stored in coins or bars. It's dust, granules, bits so fine they're measured by volume, not weight. The people use calibrated gourds or iron weights to keep transactions fair. And it's everywhere, not lying on the ground, sure, but close enough to feel casual, like gold is just part of life. Imagine brushing your teeth in the morning and noticing gold flakes in your rinse water. That's what this feels like. And yet, despite the abundance, there's reverence. No one's flaunting it. No one's yelling, "I'm rich" on the riverbanks. Gold is power, yes, but it's also sacred. It's not worn by just anyone. In many communities, only royalty or spiritual leaders could adorn themselves with it. Wearing gold without permission, that could get you a serious curse or worse. As you move deeper into the forest, the air thickens. Vines dangle like lazy snakes and moss clings to every surface. You pass shrines made of stone and wood, offerings of kola nuts and feathers laid carefully before carved figures. Here, animist beliefs. Hold strong, every stream, every hill has a guardian spirit, and gold, that's their blood. You remember something a griot once whispered, gold is not found, it appears. Like the earth allows you to borrow it temporarily. You reach a clearing now, and a small village comes into view. Children dart between huts, their feet kicking up dust. An old woman stirs something pungent in a clay pot, and the smell of fermented millet hits your nose like a punch. But what draws your eye is the man sitting cross-legged on a mat weighing gold dust on a small wooden scale. His hands are steady, his eyes sharper than his age suggests. You sit beside him, he nods but says nothing. You watch as he adds tiny iron weights to one side, adjusting the dust on the other until the beam balances like magic. He's not just measuring metal, he's calculating value, honor, fairness. And maybe that's why the system works. Silence isn't just a tradition, it's a form of trust. Here's a quirky practice for your mental travel journal. Gold traders would sometimes chew bitter leaves before negotiations, not for flavor, but because bitterness was believed to sharpen the mind and guard against deception. Whether it worked is up for debate, but it definitely kept everyone alert. The sun starts dipping, now the jungle casting long shadows that feel oddly protective. This place, this whole ecosystem of gold, it doesn't glitter like Hollywood, but it breathes, it pulses, and it flows all the way north into the waiting hands of salt traders who won't say a word. Historians still argue how decentralized this operation was. Was it run by kings or by communities? Were the minor slaves free artisans or something in between? The records are murky. Oral tradition mixes with fact and the truth hums somewhere in the middle like the river itself. But one thing is clear, the south had goldo, the north had saltso, and in between, the kingdom of Ghana. You look once more at the man weighing dust and you imagine the scene tomorrow when the caravans arrive. Salt will be placed on the ground. The gold will be set beside it. No one will speak. No one will cheat. Because here in the heart of the forest, value is measured by silence and dust. And somehow, that still feels more honest than most stock markets. You head north again. The green begins to fade, leaf by leaf, vine by vine, until the dense trees thin into scrub, and the air shifts from damp to dry. The soil turns paler, more brittle underfoot. The birds grow quieter, the breeze dustier. You're leaving gold behind now, tucked into the forest where it belongs, and moving toward the other half of the ancient equation. Because tonight you're walking into the land of salta. It begins subtly, a change in taste on your tongue, a sting in your nostrils that wasn't there before. Then you spot it, a strange shimmer on the horizon. Not water, but something harder. You get closer, no grass, no trees, just miles of cracked earth so white it hurts your eyes. This is Taghaza, or at least what's left of it, an ancient salt mining town where the buildings were once made of salt. You kneel and scrape the surface with your fingers. It flakes like hard candy, jagged and translucent. This was the North's treasure, cut into long rectangular slabs wrapped in leather and loaded onto camelback. Not a seasoning, not a luxury, but a lifesaver. You think salt's just for fries. Try living in the Sahara without it. Your body leaks it out every time you sweat, and here under the sun you sweat constantly. Without salt, muscles cramp, brains fog, hearts fail. So in West Africa, salt was life, and in some places it was worth its weight in gold. Here's your daily quirky tidbit. In some desert mining camps, workers were paid in salt still. Not gold, not coins, salt. That's where the phrase worth his salt comes from. Literally, you earned your salt because salt was currency. You wander through the ruins of Tagaza now, and it feels like walking on a forgotten lunar colony. Everything here used to be constructed from salt blocks, walls, floors, even benches. When it rained, which was rare, buildings would melt, but it was efficient. Why haul in stone when the ground gives you building material you can also eat? The mining process was brutal. Men, often enslaved or indentured, labored with iron tools, hacking at the crust, stacking slabs into towers. The sun overhead wasn't just hot, it was malicious, and the isolation deafening. Days would pass with only the sound of chisels and wind. You meet the ghost of a worker. Now he doesn't speak, of course, but you can see the rhythm in his arms, the slow mechanical strike of iron against crystal. Step, swing, chip, repeat. His feet are wrapped in cloth. His eyes are sunburnt pale. He lifts one block, balances it on his back, and you flinch under the imagined weight. This is the other end of the line. While gold glittered in the forest, salt shimmered in the wastelands. Two halves of a trade so ancient it predates most written language. And in between them, the caravans. You see them on the horizon now, long lines of camels bobbing across the dunes like ships at sea. Each camel carries two massive salt slabs, one on either side. They're led by quiet men in indigo robes, faces veiled against the wind. These are the Tuaregs, desert nomads who mastered this route centuries ago. They know where to find wells, when to rest, how to read wind and stars like maps. And they don't say much. Silence here is power. You fall in beside one of them, and he offers you water from a goatskin pouch. It tastes of leather and life. You nod your thanks. He nods back. No words needed. Historians still argue whether these traders followed a fixed schedule, annual, seasonal, or if the journey was more fluid. Climate shifts, tribal conflicts, and market demand all played roles. But what never changed was the need oaks. The south needed salt. The north needed gold. And Ghana stood at the fulcrum collecting a slice of both. The caravan stops at a rest station, an oasis marked by date palms and a well lined with stone. The camels drink deeply, their grunts echoing in the stillness. A small fire is lit. Tea is brewed, strong, sweet enough to wake the dead. You sip, and the sugar jolts your brain like lightning. It's tradition, hospitality, energy, all in one. One of the Tuareg traders unrolls a cloth and begins inspecting his salt blocks. Each one is marked with tiny notches, codes, weights, clan signs. You realize these aren't just minerals, they're certificates of authenticity. It's the original blockchain. Salt slabs were verified, tracked, even branded. You break one corner and taste it sharp, clean, slightly metallic. Real. You watch as the caravan leader pulls out a small leather pouch, gold dust already prepared. He pinches some between his fingers and sprinkles it onto a scale made from bone and string. The weight balances. He nods once. The next trade will happen soon, but not here, not yet. For now, you rest. Even the desert has a bedtime. You lay on your side, listening to the wind thread its way through dunes and tents. Somewhere nearby, a camel grumbles in its sleep. The fire crackles low, casting shadows that dance like spirits. And you think this was a world of scarcity, of hardship, of danger, and yet they built trust out into their silence. No contracts, no receipts, just ritual, honor, and reputation. Try running an Amazon delivery system with that. You smile to yourself. Maybe it was magic. Maybe it was just humanity at its most stubbornly elegant. Either way, salt here wasn't seasoning. It was life. And soon you'll see it traded for something even more valuable. Disbelief. You rise before the sun, this time following the traders as they pack their camels with deliberate practiced grace. Salt slabs, each nearly the length of your arm, are wrapped in rope and padded with cloth tied onto wooden saddles, with a gentleness that surprises you. This isn't just cargo, it's treasure. And the caravan is preparing for the final leg of a journey that may take weeks, but has remained unchanged for centuries. This is no parade. This is a ritual. The procession moves slowly through the early light shadows, stretching long and thin over dunes that ripple like water. No one speaks, no one hums. The silence is intentional, sacred. It's as if words might spook the desert, or worse, break the spell of the trade itself. You fall into step, your own footfalls muffled by the sand. The only sounds are the creaking of leather, the rhythmic thud of padded hooves, and the occasional snort from a camel, who's clearly not impressed with history. But even the animals seem to understand the weight of the moment. The caravan winds its way toward the ancient trade site, not a city, not a fortress, just a clearing. A neutral zone halfway between salt and gold. It doesn't look like much, just flat land surrounded by stones. But this was one of Africa's oldest and most efficient stock exchanges, minus the screaming brokers. The traders from the north arrive first, just as tradition demands. They dismount in silence, unwrap their slabs of salt, and place them in tidy rows across the open ground. They step back, not far, just enough to show they're not guarding the goods. And then they wait, not hiding, not watching, just waiting, eyes averted, mouths shut. You blink, you almost miss it. The traders from the south have arrived. They say nothing too. They approach slowly, eyes on the salt. Some crouch, inspecting the quality. Others nod, gesture quietly to one another, and begin setting down their own offerings. Gold dust, in tiny gourds and leather pouches placed neatly beside the salt slabs they're willing to exchange for. No negotiations, no yelling, no best price, my friend. Just silence. And here's the moment that gives you chills. The southern traders step away, now mirroring the north. and still no one touches anything. Each side waits for the other to return and either take the offer or silently reject it. If the offer's fair, the salt traders accept the gold and leave the salt behind. If not, they go, leave it untouched. Maybe they hope for a better bid next time. Maybe they're testing, but no one speaks, no one confronts, no one cheats. It's like watching a perfectly choreographed dance but with camel breath and sweating brows. Historians still argue whether this system developed out of mutual respect, cultural taboo, or good old-fashioned distrust. Some say it was a necessity, language barrier, spiritual taboos. Others claim it was a mark of wisdom, a way to avoid conflict, by removing the one thing most arguments start with speech. And then there are fringe theories. One of the more colorful ones that these silent trades were guided by spirits, invisible mediators who weighed the fairness of each deal. If the trade was unequal, the spirits would curse both parties. If it was fair, blessings would follow. You chuckle under your breath, superstitious maybe, but look at the system. It worked for centuries. And that's the kicker. This wasn't a one-off. It was reliable. Regular. Thousands of pounds of salt changed hands, hundreds of gourds of gold dust, all traded with no interpreters, no shouting, no paperwork, just trust and ritual. You crouch low now, watching as the northern traders approach again. Slowly they pick up the gold left beside some of their salt. They nod silently. Transaction complete. They leave the salt behind and step away. Others they ignore, not insulted, just unconvinced. The process repeats patiently, rhythmically, like the turning of a wheel. And you realize something strange even here in the hottest, driest part of the earth. Cool heads prevailed. No one lunges, no one cheats. The silence isn't emptiness, it's order. By midday, the sun's hammering down. You squint, sweat stinging your eyes. Most of the trades are done. The salt piles are fewer now, the gold carried off in pouches that bounce gently on camel flanks. The traders begin to pack up. No applause, no thank you come again. Just a bow of the head, a tilt of the chin, and the quiet understanding that the exchange is complete. You sit in the dust, stunned. You just watch an entire market unfold without a single word spoken. No contracts, no lawyers, no flash sales, and somehow everyone's walking away satisfied. You look up at the sky, it's blindingly blue. A hawk circles once overhead and vanishes. And you wonder what would happen if more of our world ran like this. No noise, no lies, just mutual understanding. Could we handle that? One of the traders walks past you, nods, and offers you a scrap of dried date. You take it, no words, just a look that says, you saw this, you get it. And you do. You stand now, legs, aching skin, tingling from heat and awe. The clearing is emptying slowly, respectfully. A few footprints remain, shallow impressions in the sand. By tomorrow, even those will be gone. The desert will erase the market, but not the memory. Because this wasn't just commerce. This was communion. And somewhere in the distance, another caravan is already forming. The road away from the silent market winds gently toward the edge of the savannah. The dunes fade behind you like waves swallowed by the earth, and what opens ahead is a patchwork of grassland and thorny trees. The air feels different here, not cooler exactly, but more alive. The wind whistles through the acacia branches. A flock of birds lifts off in a chaotic cloud. Life hums beneath the dust. You're walking with the southern traders now, those who brought gold in tiny pouches stitched with leather and hope. Their camels step lightly despite the weight, as if the animals know the worth of their cargo. The traders are still silent, though a few allow themselves the luxury of soft conversation now that the ritual has passed. You catch snippets, talk of weather, of sons and daughters, of how this year's gold harvest compared to the last. But no one speaks of the deal. That's not how it works. What was exchanged was sacred. It's behind them now. Finished. You pass a small grove where the group pauses to rest. A mat is rolled out. A pot of water is lifted from its leather harness, and you drink cool, slightly gritty and glorious. Someone unpacks a calabash filled with dolo, a lightly fermented millet beer. It's sour, effervescent, and just enough to make your shoulders drop. And then something shifts. From the edge of the grove comes the sound of music, slow, deep tones plucked from a kora, a 21-stringed harp lute cradled in the lap of a griot. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't need to. You recognize the role before he sings a note. Though a griot is more than a musician. He's a historian, a diplomat, a memory keeper. His words have weight. In many West African societies, griots were trusted more than written records. Their songs passed through generations, preserving the names of kings, the dates of wars, the rules of trades, even who owned which gourd of gold and why. He begins to sing. You don't understand every word, but the melody fills the space between you and the others. His voice rises and falls like wind through dry grass. He sings of the honored, the king so powerful he never spoke directly to his people. A king who controlled trade with a nod, who could end a drought with a ceremony, or at least claim to. Historians still argue whether the king of Ghana was divine or merely powerful. Some records describe him as semi-godlike. Surrounded by drums, interpreters, and layers of protocol so thick no outsider ever spoke to him face to face. Others think it was just theatrics' clever political theater to maintain mystique. Either way it worked. The griot's song drifts into a tale of two cities, Kumbi Saleh, divided between the Soninka court and the Muslim merchants. There's a verse about the great stone mosque built at the edge of town, funded not by a sultan, but by trade. A line about how the muezzin's call mingled with animist drums and no one seemed to mind. And then another beat softer, slower, he sings of the Hamiso, because yes, Ghana employed them. Whispers sent to the borders, to the salt roads, even into the goldfields, listening for signs of betrayal, of tax evasion, of rebellion. The kingdom was vast, its edges fraying, and the Ghana needed eyes, ears, silent watchers. You glance at the trader next to you. He nods. Some say the griots were spies. He murmurs, finally breaking the silence. Or maybe they were the only ones the king trusted. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't have to. You've heard enough to suspect it's true. Here's your fringe trivia moment. There are accounts mostly oral, some scrawled centuries later of griots who could stop a war with one performance. They'd arrive at the battlefield unarmed, singing the ancestry of both armies, reminding each side that their grandfathers once shared a meal, a market, a wife. Sometimes it worked. The griot finishes now and the grove falls quiet again. Not awkward quiet, sacred quiet. You feel fuller somehow, like a puzzle piece has clicked into place. The world you're walking through isn't just geography, it's memory. And it's carried in the mouths of those who dare to remember. As the caravan rises and prepares to move again, the griot stays behind. His task was not to trade, but to remind. And as you walk, his song lingers not as sound, but as rhythm in your steps. Left foot, right foot, past meets present. Soon the caravan crests a rise, and you see a village ahead, a half-day's walk at most. Smoke curls lazily from cooking fires. Children run along the road, chasing goats with laughter that pierces the haze. You smell onions and charcoal and something sweet, maybe tamarind. The traders begin to talk more now. The danger is behind them. The gold is secured. The salt will be stored and sold by the gourd. One trader jokes that his wife better not waste a single flake of it. Another chuckles. She'll use it to season your sandals. Laughter rises like birds, and you feel it again, that strange, powerful stillness inside a society that has long since disappeared, yet still breathes through stories, songs, and silent trades. You pass a carved wooden post at the village edge. On it is etched a series of marks, possibly a tally or maybe a warning, or maybe, just maybe, the silent record of one more transaction. You blink and realize this isn't ancient history. This is economy as culture, trade as theater, math as ritual, and silence as language. You don't even realize how exhausted you are until your legs nearly give out inside the village. The air here smells like roasted peanuts and distant rain. The camels groan as they're unburdened, the last clinks of metal stirrups fading into the hum of daily life. You're ushered into a round mud-walled house with a thatched roof, its interior dim and cool, a blessed contrast to the heat-soaked road behind you. You sit on a woven mat and the rhythm of the journey slows. This isn't the center of Ghana's power. This is the outer web, one of the countless small towns that made the empire function like a living organism. Merchants, middlemen, farmers, herders, each playing their part, most never seeing the king or the salt mines or the gold fields, but their labor oils the gears of everything. A young girl enters with a calabash full of spicy stew and millet paste. No words, just a glance that says, eat. You do. It burns and comforts at once. Outside men begin sorting the salt blocks. Some will be cut and sold locally. Others repacked and sent east or west. This trade doesn't stop. It pulses. And in the background you hear the drums begin again. Not griot drums. These are local rhythms, faster, less ceremonial. A beat to accompany chores or news, or maybe just to entertain the spirits. In West Africa, drums weren't just music. They were messages. Some patterns meant a guest has arrived. Others meant storm coming or bring your grain to market. Historians still argue whether certain drum languages could truly convey full sentences or just general alerts. But some villages swore by them. It said messages could travel faster by drum than by horse, faster even than some caravans. And this little town, it's a drum node. You can almost see it, information rippling out like sound waves, jumping from one village to the next long before the first camel arrives. You step back into the sunlight, now blinking against the glare. A market is forming temporary stalls shaded by woven mats propped on driftwood poles. Traders lay out beads, fabrics, smoked fish, carved spoons, knives, copper bracelets, and of course pinches of gold dust stored in eggshells or hollow bird bones. Bartering begins, but it's low-voiced and unhurried. Everyone knows what things cost. Inflation hasn't been invented yet. No one's shouting over your shoulder about a flash sale. You pass a stand where a boy no older than 10 is measuring salt with a notched stick. Each notch represents a fair exchange for a certain gourd of millet or bundle of dyed cloth. His fingers are stained from ochre, likely from helping dye fabrics that now shimmer purple and teal in the sun. And here's your fringe moment of the day. Some of these dyes were worth almost as much as gold, especially the indigo blues. Deep color was rare, and it marked wealth both visual and symbolic. The person in blue, probably someone important. You notice an elder sitting at the edge of the market, draped in indigo from shoulder to shin. Her face is tattooed with delicate white lines. She watches the crowd with an expression that could curdle milk or crown kings. You nod. She doesn't nod back. But you get the sense she remembers everything. That's another thing about this world. It's layered. You don't always see the power right away. It's not just the kings. Power lives in old women with eyes like flint, in salt traders who measure fairness in silence, in boys with notched sticks. You make your way past the market and into the fields. A group of women are pounding millet with long wooden pestles, their movements synchronized, almost dance-like. With every thump, a small cloud of grain dust rises. They smile at you but keep working. The rhythm matters. One pauses and offers you a drink from a gourd, sweet thick laced with ginger. It's probably got a bit of fermented kick to it too, because suddenly your cheeks warm and the sun feels a little softer. You ask gently how far the capital is. She shrugs. Far enough to forget your name by the time you get there. It's a joke? Sort of. Because in Ghana's golden age, the capital, Kumbisala, was a legend to most villagers, a place of goldstone palaces and silent kings. But here life revolved around smaller rhythms: planting, harvest, drought, rain, trade, rest, repeat. And yet, these little rhythms powered the big ones. One of the children scampers past holding a toy camel carved from bone. You smile. He's reenacting the caravan, arranging tiny salt blocks in the sand, making soft clicking sounds with his mouth to mimic camel feet. This world teaches early. Memory is passed down in stories, songs, and games. You settle beside him and draw a circle in the sand. He nods, understanding instantly that this circle is the Shawkinch market. Us. You place a pebble. He places a pinch of salt. And just like that, the trade begins silent, simple, sacred. A breeze stirs the air, dust dances. And you think this empire wasn't built in marble or stained glass. It was built in dirt and rhythm. Not everything leaves ruins. Sometimes legacy is movement. Sometimes history lives in footsteps. Sometimes the most extraordinary things happen in places that don't even have names on a map. By the time you leave the village, your feet are calloused and your thoughts heavier. The kind of heavy that isn't tiring more, like a blanket you carry inside. The people wave you off with that same gentle nod they give the sunset, as if your departure is just another part of the day's rhythm. Ahead lies the road to the capital Kumbisala. You've heard about it in songs and murmured stories, and now the idea of seeing it feels like chasing a constellation across the sky. You're not even sure you'll recognize it when it appears. Cities this old don't shout, they rise like whispers. You travel with a small group, now traders, a few pilgrims. A man who insists he's going to deliver a message to the king. You suspect he's delivering gossip. The road is more crowded than you expect, evidence of how alive this ancient network truly was. You're walking on arteries of empire worn smooth by centuries of sandaled feet and camel hooves. At first, Kumbi Saleh seems like a mirage, a shimmer in the heat, but then real shapes, rectangles of stone. Low and thick, unusual for this region, not towering like Egyptian temples or Moroccan kasbahs. No, this capital was built more for endurance than spectacle. Wide streets, mud brick homes, stone foundations. It looks humble. Until you realize how many people live here. Tens of thousands, maybe more. This isn't a palace with a city attached. It's a city that swells like a tide, and in its heart beats a mystery. Because here's the weird part. Kumbi Saleh wasn't one city. It was two, split cleanly down the middle. You step into the southern section first, the Soninke Royal City. Indigenous, traditional, animist, the heartland of the Ghana Empire. You see open-air courtyards where elders debate shrines to local deities swathed in feathers and red ochre, and guards with shields made of leather stretched tight over wood. No mosques here, no Arabic scripts, but there's order. Serious order. You walk past tax counters, yes. Tax counters where officials keep ledgers, oral ledgers in their heads. You see baskets labeled with symbols representing amounts each tied to goods. 2 for salt, 3 for ivory, 5 for slaves. The system is dazzling in its simplicity. A man explains it to you using a handful of sticks and a cowrie shell. Somehow by the end of it you feel like you've passed an accounting exam. But don't get too comfortable, because just across a narrow buffer zone of open land, almost like a neutral zone, you cross into the Muslim merchant city, and everything changes. You hear Arabic, you smell mint tea and strange spices. You see people in flowing white robes, their heads wrapped against the sun, kneeling in orderly rows for afternoon prayer. There's a grand stone mosque. Loft was here, built with help from North African architects. It's not lavish, but its arches and symmetry hum with sacred geometry. Historians still argue whether this mosque was an actual religious site or a political gesture part, faith part PR campaign, to show the Islamic world that Ghana was open for business. Either way it worked. Merchants came from as far as Egypt, Morocco, even Baghdad. You wander into the merchant quarter and lose track of time. Silks from the east, beads from the coast, books, yes, books, in Arabic stored in reed baskets. A scholar invites you into a shaded alcove and reads aloud from a 200-year-old manuscript about astronomy. He pauses to sip tea, then continues as if you were born into this world of stars and ink. He tells you something that sticks with you. Gold buys land, salt buys life, but books buy eternity. You stare at the calligraphy and wonder how much of our own world would survive if paper were our only time capsule. Here's your quirky detail of the night at the height of its power. Kumbi Saleh had a standing army of 200,000 soldiers. That's not a typo. 200,000. Modern historians argue whether the number was exaggerated. Some think it included all able-bodied men, not just professionals, but either way, Ghana didn't mess around. And yet, you don't see many soldiers here. Why? Because Tolowaso, order was economic. The trade system was so precise, so intertwined with daily life, that disruption was bad for everyone. Bandits didn't loot the trade routes, they guarded them. Peace wasn't just a philosophy, it was profitable. But there's tension here too. Whispers. The Soninka rulers don't practice Islam, but the Muslim traders are growing in number and influence. There are arguments about festivals, taxes, marriage laws. You overhear two merchants debate whether the king should convert. One says yes, it would open more trade. The other frowns, the spirits would not approve. You feel it in the air, a kingdom on a threshold, caught between tradition and influence, between silence and scripture, between ancestral drums and foreign prayers. You walk back through the neutral zone between the cities and notice something odd. There are no walls, no checkpoints, just space, deliberate, unspoken, as if both sides agreed better to leave breathing room than fight over breath itself. The sun sets behind the mosque dome, bathing the earth in deep orange. Smoke from dinner fires curls upward. The capital settles, voices soften. Night folds in. And you realize something humbling. For all its split identity, this city malfunctioned. It didn't need one truth, it lived in the tension between two. And maybe that's the secret, not just to Ghana's survival, but its greatness. You sleep that night in the no man's land, the quiet patch between Kumbi Saleh's twin hearts. Not quite in the merchant city, not quite among the Soninka elite, just beneath a crooked tamarind tree that's probably older than every building around it. The stars overhead are blunt and clear, like someone scratched them into the sky with a dagger. The night hums with insects and distant music. You're half asleep when you hear it, the low, mournful blow of a curved horn echoing from somewhere in the Soninka quarter. It's not an alarm. It's a signal to. At dawn, you rise before the sun again. Traders are already on the move, wrapping bundles, counting gourds. One man sharpens a blade, using nothing but riverstone and rhythm. Another woman braids herbs into a bundle, muttering names under her breath. These aren't personal items, they're offerings. Today isn't just about commerce, it's a ceremony day. You're led toward a stone courtyard, where a few high-ranking officials stand in embroidered cloth surrounded by attendants holding fans made of woven reeds. At the center of the group is an empty stool carved low to the ground and gleaming with age. You already know what this is. You've heard the griots sing of it. The sacred stool. In many West African traditions, the stool is more than a seat. It's a throne of the soul. To sit on it is to accept the ancestors, to embody leadership. You don't sit on power, you sit in it. The Ghana king, when he did appear, would sit silently here and the world would listen. But the king isn't here today. That's not how he rules. Ghana's king, sometimes called the Ghana, himself is cloaked in mystery. He appears, rarely speaks, even less. His words are delivered by intermediaries, who speak them aloud while he remains serene and silent. Historians still argue whether this was rooted in spiritual belief, fear of assassination, or theatrical statecraft. Maybe all three. One popular tale says his silence protected the kingdom. If he ever lied, the gods would curse the empire. So he simply never spoke. You're guided to a shaded side alcove to watch as a tax procession arrives. And this is where the kingdom really shines, not in war, not in wealth, but in administration. One by one, traders present their offerings. The items vary: salt blocks, gold dust, dyed cloth, cola nuts. But each is measured, weighed, and recorded. Though record keepers don't write anything down. They recite. The kingdom's economy ran on oral math. Phrases structured in such a way that rhythm preserved memory. 3 bags of millet from the red-roofed trader for 2 handfuls of salt. Repeat it, pass it, remember it. Think of it like accounting by poetry. And it worked. Fringe scholars love to compare these oral accountants to human blockchain. Immutable, communal, decentralized, but in song form. As the tribute piles grow, dancers enter the courtyard. At first it seems like celebration, but no, this is ritual math. Every step is calculated, each turn echoes the rhythms of trade. A drummer joins in, tapping out the long and short beat that corresponds to days of the market calendar. Gist, you had no idea timekeeping could sound so funky. The dancers represent different commodities. One wears feathers and moves like rain, representing agriculture. Another leaps in jagged lines, mimicking the desert wind, representing salt. A third twirls slowly, carrying a gourd marked with gold symbols. Each is a living bar graph. Then the procession ends. The stool remains empty. The tribute is accepted and the crowd begins to disperse. No speeches, no receipts, just quiet shared knowing. You're handed a gourd of water flavored with hibiscus. As you sip, one of the younger officials leans toward you. Most outsiders look for the king, he says softly, but they miss the real question. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. How did we make silence powerful? And that's the heart of it, isn't it? We modern shout, we tweet, we brand ourselves in fonts and bios and clickbait titles. But Ghana wielded silence like a scepter. The king said nothing and still commanded loyalty. Traders made deals with no words at all. The only place people raised their voices was in song. You wander toward the edge of town, now passing a courtyard where elders sit in semicircle. They don't look at you, but one raises a hand, just slightly. You pause. He hums a 3-note tune. Another elder responds with a 5-note phrase. You just witnessed a judicial ruling. Some cases here were settled not with speeches but with a melody. Elders would deliberate using musical tones tied to proverbs. If the accused recognized the proverb embedded in the tune, he was considered wise and likely innocent, if not well. You didn't want to be tone-deaf in ancient Ghana. Historians still debate whether this system was metaphorical or literal. Fringe enthusiasts say it bordered on legal telepathy. Skeptics say it was just performance. But either way, it reflects something undeniable. This was a kingdom where knowledge lived in the air. Not in scrolls, not in stone, in breath, in drum, in silence. And you're starting to hear it now. Not just the facts, not just the spectacle, the hum beneath the history, the rhythm that held it all together. And as the sun drops below the horizon, draping the two cities in rose gold and indigo shadow, you realize you came looking for gold and salt, but you found something rarer, a civilization that made silence speak louder than any empire ever dared. You spend the evening tracing paths through Kumbi Saleh that aren't on any map, narrow footpaths between stone homes, gaps between tents where merchants whisper under flickering lanterns. Little children with dust-covered legs dart past you, chasing each other with no destination, just laughter. The market's buzz has faded, but the afterglow of commerce lingers like incense in the corners of the city. There's a woman crouched near a hearth, grinding something into a paste. She's not selling it, not yet. She's preparing. She looks up briefly, nods once, and goes back to the rhythm of stone on stone. That seems to be a pattern here. People don't announce importance, they simply do. You're ushered to stay the night in a merchant's compound. Not a palace, but it feels like one. The walls are decorated with hand-painted symbols of trade routes and family crests, some real, some aspirational. Clay jugs line the shelves. A leopard skin hangs by the entry, symbolic. You're told of a journey completed without loss. Over a shared plate of millet porridge and spiced goat, your host tells you about the silent law. Not the silent barter you witnessed earlier. This is different. This is social law. Gossip, theft, debt. Everything is handled without courts, without conflict. If someone steals, they're not arrested. They're ignored, shunned, denied from markets, cut off from trade until they make things right. Shame was more potent than shackles. You try to imagine that working in your own world is stealing a car and being met not with sirens, but with silence. You'd still have the car, but nowhere to go. And it wasn't just economics. Silence enforced trust. Your host explains how larger caravans would form not from contracts or guards, but from reputation. If your name held weight, if your silence had never broken the wrong way, you could join the route. If not, you walked alone. And in the desert, alone meant gone. Here's a fringe tidbit that makes you pause mid-chew. Some historians believe Ghana's traders memorized routes through scent. Not visual landmarks, not star patterns, but the smell of certain plants, the dryness of a breeze, even the feel of the sand between fingers. It wasn't navigation, it was intuition trained into memory. Like a camel's nose, your host jokes, only smarter. After dinner, he shows you a treasure, not gold, not salt, but a rock. Okay, but not just any rock. It's dark, smooth, heavy, almost metallic. He places it in your hands and watches your face. From the east, he says, traded 6 blocks of salt for it. They say it's touched lightning. You blink. You're holding out a meteorite. A literal piece of space passed from trader to trader until it ended up here in the hands of a man who still believes it's sacred. Which honestly, it kind of is. How many empires can claim to hold pieces of the sky? And this is what's so mind-bending. Ghana wasn't a one-note kingdom. It wasn't just gold and salt. It was everything of that passed through. Ivory, leather, ostrich feathers, copper, dyes, horses, stories, spices, and sometimes things that had no name, just wait and wonder. You sit with him late into the night talking about the future. Not your future, his. Because even in this age, this 1,000-year-old chapter, people dreamed ahead. He wants his son to become a trader, sure, but a writer too. He's seen Arabic script. He wants his family's story inked on parchment, not just sung around fires. But here's where the twist comes. He doesn't want to write the king's name. Why? Because it's a taboo. The king of Ghana was sacred, and often speaking his true name or writing it was considered dangerous. Some scholars argue this was symbolic. Others think it was protection from sorcery. Either way, the king existed at a distance, visible but untouchable, powerful but unnamed. In some records written by later outsiders, the Ghana king is never called by his personal name only. The Ghana, as if he was the land, not just its ruler, like a mountain you don't climb, only bow to. And still he ruled a system so effective that no coins were needed. That's right, Ghana ran its economy without minting currency. Gold dust was measured by weight, salt by size. Everything was barter, every deal reliant on memory and mutual trust. Historians still argue how this worked at such a massive scale. How did they avoid fraud and forced value? Some believe there were designated dust officials with exacting standards. Others say it was all community surveillance. You cheat once and you don't trade again, ever. And then there's the theory, whispered, not confirmed, that some trades were decided by dreams. That's right. You'd meet your fellow trader, you'd agree silently, and then you'd both sleep nearby. In the morning, if your dream was favorable, the deal went through. If not, you walked away. Modern economists would call this irrational, but tell that to a kingdom that thrived for centuries while Europe was tearing itself apart over borders and blood. You say goodnight to your host and step outside. The city is hushed. The air carries the smell of ash and jasmine. Somewhere a nightbird cries, and you turn to see a procession of shadows. 3 figures walking in single file, robed in cloth so dark it drinks the moonlight. Priests, messengers, spies. You don't ask, not here, not now. You just watch as they disappear down the road, silent as trade itself. You wake to the soft sweep of a broom across packed earth. Not an alarm, not a rooster. Just a daily act of clearing dust, a quiet resistance against the desert's slow encroachment. The compound stirs with movement. Someone's grinding millet again. A goat bleats once like it's also had enough of mornings. Today you're leaving the capital not because you want to, but because there's one last piece of the story to see. The mines. The places where Ghana's true power, its lifeblood, was pulled from the earth, grain by grain. And to get there, you'll travel south toward a region whose name alone shimmered across maps. Ohosofotlungarat. The journey is greener now. Gone are the dry Sahel stretches and dusty camel lines. Then this is a world of rivers, palms, and forest edges. You smell damp bark and flowering vines. Your guide tells you that in the old days, salt moved north by camel, and gold moved silently north by foot, always on foot, always at night. Why? Because the gold was secret. Ghana's kings guarded the location of the mines so fiercely that even most locals didn't know their exact position. Traders would arrive at a forest clearing, leave their goods, and back away. Later, gold dust would appear in response. If the offer was fair, the exchange happened. If not, the goods were left untouched. No words, no faces, just trust wrapped in ritual. Historians still argue whether this silent system was logistically scalable or more symbolic. Could entire caravans really depend on mystery? Some suggest intermediaries or tribal go-betweens acted as silent brokers. Others think fear of divine retribution, of offending the spirits of gold, was enough to maintain honesty. And then there's the more mystical theory that the gold itself was considered alive, and would only show itself if treated with respect. You arrive at a forest village with huts on stilts and paths of pressed mud. Children peer from behind hanging vines. One of them holds a string of glass beads, blue, red, yellow evidence of trade networks that reached as far as the Mediterranean. You smile and he darts behind a tree. You're led by a soft-spoken man whose entire left hand is stained with black residue. You realize it's from gold pannings. Not mining with pickaxes, this isn't a mountain operation. This is sifting through riverbeds. You kneel beside him as he demonstrates. It's slow, hypnotic, like shaking the world's smallest hourglass until it reveals something timeless. He doesn't speak as he works. Instead, he hums a low, looping tune, the kind of melody that probably predates every empire that ever tried to own this land. And when a tiny glint appears barely visible in the slurry, he lifts the pan like an offering. You can't help but whisper, "That's it?" He smiles, not smug, not surprised. "Enough," he says, just that. Because in this world, enough wasn't greed. Enough was power, quiet power. And here's a detail you might have missed. Ghana didn't flood the market with gold. The king controlled the flow, carefully managing how much was released into trade. The big gold nuggets, the ones the size of walnuts, those were kept for the royal treasury. Only dust made it into circulation. By doing that, the kingdom preserved value and ensured scarcity. It's the same principle modern banks use with currency supply. Only Ghana did it without spreadsheets. Back in the village, you notice something else. A shrine, small, humble, marked by cowrie shells and feathers. You ask who it honors. The spirit of the earth, your guide says. She gives gold, but she takes blood. It's not metaphor. Gold mining was dangerous, exhausting, sometimes fatal. Offerings were made before each dig, not to beg for wealth, but to ask forgiveness for disturbing what should sleep. You pause here, letting that settle, because this wasn't a world where resources were just taken. They were negotiated with nature, with the divine, even with silence. Nearby, a group of women sit dyeing cloth in deep indigo vats. They laugh as they work, teasing one another with the ease of people who've shared the same rhythm since birth. One of them waves you over and shows you how the fabric, green at first, slowly turns blue in the air. A trick of chemistry and sun, magic if you didn't know better. And yet, you don't know better. Not here. You take a piece of dyed cloth, wrap it around your shoulders, and feel oddly at home. Before you leave, you witness one last exchange. A man places a bundle of salt wrapped in leather on a flat stone near the village entrance. Then he backs away. Minutes later, another man, hooded silent, emerges from the trees and places a gourd of gold dust beside it. No words, no nods, just a slow passing of power. A system so old and so intact that it feels eternal. You mount a borrowed horse, now ready to return north. And as you ride, you pass a cluster of children singing a rhyme you don't understand. But the melody sticks in your head. It repeats, like a drumbeat, like a transaction, like the sound of 1,000 years held in rhythm. You look behind you once. Just trees. No minds, no markers. Just a kingdom hidden in leaves, dust, and silence. The journey back north feels different now. You're not just retracing steps, you're carrying something invisible. Not gold, not salt, but a sense that history isn't locked in books or buried in ruins. It breathes. It echoes in footfalls, in empty space, in what people say, and in what they choose not to say. You pass small caravans heading the other way, donkeys laden with bundles, children riding sideways on oxen, merchants with eyes that seem older than their faces. Everyone moves with purpose. Everyone belongs to this ancient pulse of trade. You stop in a roadside settlement where you're offered roasted locusts and ginger water. They taste better than expected, like crunchy, citrusy popcorn. A woman nearby is painting symbols onto a cloth. They aren't words, they're roots. Tiny maps worn on the back like storytelling capes. She gestures for you to try one on. You do. It feels like armor. This wasn't just a trade empire. It was a cartographic culture. One where geography wasn't just learned, it was lived. Roads weren't drawn. They were remembered through feet chants and inked skin. As you travel, your guide begins to speak more openly. His name is Umar. He's part griot, part trader, part philosopher. He explains how their memories worked in Ghana. Every family had its own oral archive, names, debts, triumphs, shames, nothing written, but nothing forgotten. A man lives, he says, as long as his story is told. You pass a grove of baobab trees, and he points to one with a split trunk. That's where a great dispute was ended, he says. 2 villages, 1 well. They argued for days. Then an elder arrived and carved a line between the roots. Left drinks before sunrise, right after. That line became law. No document, just bark. And somehow that held. Here's a quirky moment. You find a monkey skull tied with blue string, hanging from a tree. Umar says it's a merchant's talisman for good negotiation. Some believe monkeys are clever, always getting the better end of a deal. So you carry a monkey charm to stay sharp, or mischievous. Fringe scholars theorize that Ghana had an early form of insurance. Caravans contributed small amounts of gold dust into a shared pot. If a trader was robbed, or if his goods were lost to flood fire or folly, he could claim from the pot to rebuild. It wasn't official, it wasn't written, but it worked. And it only worked because of their reputation. Cheat the pot. You're blacklisted. Trade was built on trust, and trust was enforced by memory. Forgetting wasn't just rude, it was dangerous. You reach a high bluff overlooking a river bend and stop for breath. Below, a cluster of small boats float near the bank. They're carved from single tree trunks, long and narrow and somehow elegant. A group of boys leap into the water, their laughter echoing against the sandstone cliffs. The river was Ghana's other great road. You realize this empire didn't sprawl across land so much as thread through it. Like embroidery. Umar pulls a gourd from his satchel and pours out a small amount of honeyed millet beer. He lets it drip onto the earth, offering, he says, to the road, because even the road has a spirit. And in Ghana, spirits are everywhere. In trees, in wells, in wind. This belief didn't vanish with the arrival of Islam. It blended. You pass a shrine where cowrie shells sit beneath a Quranic verse etched on a stone slab. Two worlds layered, no war between them, just accommodation. Historians still argue how much Islam really changed Ghana. Some say it transformed politics and finance. Others insist the core stayed animist with Islamic forms layered on top. You see both, a mosque beside a spirit hut, a merchant who prays 5 times a day but still consults a dream interpreter before a big deal. And then Umar tells you about the mufal, because no kingdom lasts forever. Ghana's decline didn't come from within. It came like a desert wind, slow then sudden. New powers rose in the east, armies with different beliefs, trade routes shifted, the Almoravids. A Berber Muslim group swept southward. Some say they conquered Ghana. Others claim they simply disrupted enough to break the flow. But here's the uncomfortable truth. We're not sure. The records are thin. The silence becomes literal. Whole centuries vanish into gaps. Fringe theorists point to climate change, to internal rebellion, even to supernatural revenge for disturbing sacred minds. Modern historians mostly agree that economics played the biggest role. As trade moved elsewhere, so did power. And just like that, the kingdom faded. But here's what didn't fade the memory. You pass through a village where children are playing kingdom. One is the king seated on a stool made of stacked gourds. Another is a merchant bargaining with pebbles. A third is the salt man dragging a chunk of chalk wrapped in a cloth. They're laughing, pretending, and yet they're doing what Ghana did best, telling without speaking. Because this kingdom's greatest legacy isn't gold or salt or stone ruins. It's how they made memory into infrastructure. You leave the bluff and descend toward the river. Umar begins to hum. You recognize the tune. You don't know what it means, but you know how it feels. And in that moment, you understand what it means to carry a kingdom that no longer exists, except in breath, except in silence, except in stories told by firelight or traded in the dark between strangers who trust each other even if they've never met. You've just walked through a civilization that made silence speak, and you'll never hear it the same way again. The boat that takes you back north glides like a whisper. Long, slim, and carved from a single baobab trunk, it skims across the river as if the water itself is cooperating. Your oarsman doesn't speak. He rows with slow, even strokes matching the rhythm of birds calling through the reeds. You feel like you're floating through time, like if you lean too far over the side, you might fall straight into another century. You pass crumbling river stations now half swallowed by vines. In one, you spot a carved figure still standing tall in the water's edge, a guardian worn by flood and sun but still watching. Silent as always. As you glide northward, something becomes clear. Ghana wasn't a loud empire. It didn't leave grand inscriptions, monuments screaming conquest. It left whispers. Quiet systems, living memories, the kind of infrastructure that vanishes physically, but echoes forever in custom and culture. At one bend in the river, your guide Umar, again back at your side, taps your shoulder and gestures toward a distant clearing. There, under the open sky, a man sits cross-legged before a group of boys and girls. He's holding a talking drum. It's not for music. It's for mer language. These drums mimic the tones of speech, especially in tonal languages, and could carry complex messages across miles. Entire conversations conducted by rhythm. He begins to play. The children repeat the phrases with sticks on smaller drums, giggling when they get the intonation wrong. Historians still argue whether this was just communication or a kind of encrypted storytelling. Because if you didn't speak the language, you couldn't decode the drum's meaning. The beat might sound simple, but it could say, "The salt is spoiled," or "Send the gold south," or even "Beware." Raiders crossed the dune at dusk. That's the thing about Ghana, it made complex systems sound simple. It hid sophistication in plain rhythm. By late afternoon, you're walking again following a caravan route used for centuries. The sand here carries thousands of footprints, some fresh, some likely from generations past. You can almost feel the echo of feet before you, like you're being led by the past itself. As the sun begins to drop, you arrive at a kind of crossroads, the meeting stones. Low circular slabs set into the earth where traders would sit to make final exchanges. You notice tiny carvings along the edge of one symbols of commodities, hand cut into stone, a salt wedge, a curled snake, a palm frond, a drop of gold. This is where deals were closed, but not with words. Instead, traders would set their goods on the stone and walk away. If a second offering appeared in return, the deal was done. If not, it wasn't. No argument, no negotiation, just a pure trust-based transaction. Axil. Fringe historians point out how rare this is in human history, a system of a no-haggle economy. On this scale, it only worked because everyone believed in the same story that breaking the ritual broke your standing, and your standing was everything. You try it. Umar hands you a tiny bead, blue and cloudy. You place it gently on the stone and step back. Nothing happens. You laugh a little. Of course it wouldn't. But Umar just smiles. The exchange isn't always gold, he says. Sometimes it's memory. He picks up the bead and pockets it. Now I remember you. You can't tell if he's joking. Maybe you've stopped needing to know. You reach a desert edge settlement just before nightfall, where tents made of camel hide snap in the wind. Inside, the smell of burning resin fills the air like sage and sandalwood thick enough to taste. A woman sits beside the fire with a fan made of vulture feathers telling a story to a group of traders. You join them. The story is about a man who tried to cheat the silent trade. He left worthless goods, took gold, and ran. But when he returned home, no one spoke to him. Not a single word. Not his wife, not his brothers, not the market. The silence followed him until he fled into the desert, never to return. Did that really happen, you whisper to Umar. He grins. It's true every time it's told. That might be the best definition of history you've ever heard. And now you start to realize Ghana's true power wasn't gold or salt or armies. It was Ghana consensus. Everyone agreed to play by the same rules, even when those rules were unwritten, even when they were enforced by memory, rhythm, or ritual. That kind of cohesion, it's rarer than gold. As the stars rise, someone begins to drum softly. The others hum a low rising melody. You don't understand the words, but the feeling is clear. It's welcome. It's memory. It's home. And sitting there in the sand, you realize something strange. You never saw the Ghana king. You never needed to. Because in this empire, you are ruled by silence, not absence. You're guided not by orders, but by structure so old it's in the bones of every trade, every chant, every drumbeat echoing across the Sahara. And tomorrow, the salt will move again, the gold will shimmer again, and this whisper of a kingdom will carry on not in textbooks, but in every quiet deal made without a single word. The night air curls cool around your shoulders, surprising after the day's heat. Somewhere nearby a donkey brays once, then falls silent again. You're lying on your back outside the tent, watching the stars scatter like spilled grain across the sky. They look different out here closer, maybe. Or maybe it's just that your mind is slowed enough to notice them. The traders around you sleep in pairs and clusters wrapped in layered cloth, their faces mostly covered. A few still murmur stories in low tones. You catch snatches, names, roots, numbers. Every word is memory maintenance. Because in Ghana, to forget is to be erased. Tomorrow the caravan moves, and you'll join it. Umar hands you a small cloth pouch at dawn. Inside is a string of cowrie shells and a small disc of metal. Not gold, iron, so for luck, he says, and for bartering. Iron was once as valuable as gold in certain parts of Ghana. It wasn't shiny, but it was life. You couldn't plow a field or forge a weapon without it. Utility sometimes outweighed sparkle. And that's another Ghanaian secret. Value was always contextual. Salt iron cloth kola nuts. These weren't secondary to gold. They were currency in their own right, depending on time, place, need. The economy wasn't rigid. It was as adaptable as the desert wind. You begin walking at sunrise feet, crunching softly over packed sand. The caravan is long, a snake of color and quiet footsteps. Most riders don't speak unless necessary. This isn't a tour, it's movement with purpose. Hours pass in shifting heat. A trader next to you begins a quiet chant, more breath than voice. Others slowly join in. It's not for entertainment. It's a pace-setting song. Each verse marks a distance, each refrain a rest stop. Think of it like a medieval Fitbit, only with fewer notifications and way more soul. By midday, the group stops in a shaded grove. A pot is passed around containing a sour fermented milk that smells like wet leather and tastes surprisingly okay. You drink, wince, smile. The others nod approvingly. You're one of them now. Initiated by heat, rhythm, and flavor. Someone shows you a carved board used for counting, a precursor to an abacus, pebbles and grooves. Umar explains how each column marks a commodity: salt, gold, cloth, ivory. It's how the caravan master remembers who gets what cut at the end of the journey. No receipts, no ledgers, just pebbles and trust. Historians still argue how formalized Ghana's accounting systems were. Some suggest there were trained counters, proto-bureaucrats assigned to larger caravans. Others believe it was all informal, preserved through personal codes and oral contracts. Either way, mistakes were rare, because mistakes meant dishonor, and dishonor, that meant exile. In the late afternoon, you cross into a former Soninka territory, where stone ruins peek out from under dry grass. No one mentions them, but Umar lingers at one fallen archway, brushing sand away from an inscription too worn to read. Once he says this was where caravans began. His voice is lower now, reverent. You sit nearby as he tells the story of the first traders. Not kings, not soldiers, but farmers who realized their goats were worth salt, their millet worth cloth. No dramatic origin myth, just need and movement. Tied by memory, the start of an empire was not war, it was barter. Here's a fringe theory Umar shares with a chuckle. Some claim the first trade routes were mapped by ants. Sounds ridiculous until you think about it. Ants move efficiently, they mark trails. Some villages still use the phrase follow the ants to mean take the smart road. As dust settles, the caravan enters an oasis town. Date palms sway overhead. Children run alongside you shouting greetings. You hear multiple languages, Mande, Berber, even something that sounds faintly like ancient Arabic. The town is a linguistic quilt, woven by trade. You settle for the night under a woven awning. As the final light fades, Umar tells you about the air stones. They're not magical, not exactly. They're stones passed from one merchant generation to the next, unmarked, heavy, smooth. Their only function is to remind the bearer you were trusted with the road. To drop it, to lose it, is shame. He reaches into his bag and shows you his, oval, flat, nothing fancy. But you understand immediately that it might be the most valuable thing he owns. Later, a group of elders sit cross-legged around a fire, whispering a story so old it has no known author. It's not about war or treasure. It's about a man who forgot the name of a trade partner's father. Just that. And because of that small disrespect, the trade failed. Whole families lost roots. A salt mine dried up. A gold stream was cursed. It's not a lesson about greed. It's a lesson about names. Names mattered. Remembering them wasn't politeness, it was survival. And you get the sense that in Ghana, forgetting someone's name was the closest thing to sin. As the fire dies down, you lean back and watch the stars again. Somewhere a hyena calls. Someone chuckles in the dark. And in your hand, you still clutch Umar's iron coin. Not because you need it, but because now you remember him. By now, you feel it in your bones. The rhythm of footsteps on dust, the quiet bartering, the way knowledge passes hand to hand, not in books, but in objects, chants, gestures, pauses. The kingdom of Ghana isn't just a chapter in a textbook anymore. It's a place that lives in your breath, in the way your silence now feels heavier, purposeful, almost sacred. You rise early for the final stretch. The caravan is already stirring. Men securing bundles, women braiding hair tight for the wind. A goat has gone missing, of course, but no one panics. It'll turn up. It always does. You follow the line northward, approaching the outer ring of the empire, where the Sahel begins to thin, where the sky opens wider, and the land flattens into a sea of pale scrub. You see the city walls. Long before you reach them, not grand or looming, but firm. Purpose-built, constructed from mud brick and reinforced with palm beams. This is Kumbisala, or what's left of it. At its height, it buzzed with languages and currencies. Arab merchants in flowing white robes, Soninka traders in indigo cloth, Ethiopian horses, Egyptian perfumes, fat bundles of salt bricks and little satchels of gold dust tied with sinew and string. 1,000 accents all blending in the ohum of economy. And always, silence at the point of exchange. You're guided through what remains the ruins of a mosque, a rectangular market square, the faded outlines of elite homes. Not much is left above ground, but your guide, this one old enough to have taught Omar, points with his staff drawing shapes in the dirt where walls once stood. You don't need to see it, he says. You need to remember it. And you do. You remember the priestly silence of the gold traders, the hum of a counting chant, the rhythm of hooves striking sand, the whisper of cloth soaked in dye drying in the forest sun. You remember the children trading chalk for salt and play. You remember the rule, no name forgotten, no exchange without respect. Historians still argue whether Ghana collapsed from outside invasion or internal entropy, whether it was weakened by trade shifts, drought, religious tension, or slow migration. Some say it simply became something else. Passed its knowledge down the line to Mali, then to Songhai, like a flame handed between candles. But you don't need a scholarly answer. You've seen what they haven't, how the empire endures in the habits of its descendants, in rituals, in trade routes still followed, in drums still echoing across distant hills. At sunset, you're invited to a final ceremony, not grand, not scripted, just at a circle of elders and traders, sitting around a fire with bundles between them, salt, cola nuts, dried fish, blue beads, woven mats. They place them one by one on a flat stone each, naming what they've brought. When it's your turn, you have nothing, so you reach into your pocket and place the iron coin. No one speaks, but the circle nods, and that's enough. One of the elders recites a verse, voice raspy with age. Let memory be the weight you carry. Let silence be the law you honor. Let the trade be fair and the journey long. You repeat it under your breath. The stars return brighter than ever. You've walked the golden silence, and now it walks with you. So now, as the fires dim and the caravan disappears into the hush of the Sahel, let your thoughts drift gently across that timeless sand. Picture the slow sway of pack animals beneath indigo skies. Feel the creak of a wooden saddle, the crinkle of salt-wrapped leather, the soft brush of wind-stirred millet fields. Let your breath match the rhythm of those ancient footfalls, steady, deliberate, patient, each one carrying not just goods, but memory. Each step a link in the quiet chain of trust that held an empire together without armies, without paper, without noise. Inhale the wisdom of rhythm, of knowing when to speak and when not to. You're part of that story now. You've heard the gold move in silence. You've seen how value was measured not just in weight, but in honor. You felt how the past can live without shouting, how legacy can settle into the very air. So ease your body into stillness. Let your limbs go soft. Let your mind unspool like a well-worn map, folding into sleep, carrying the roads of Ghana with you. And if in your dreams you find yourself back in the market at Kumbi Saleh with a stone in your hand and a stranger watching from behind a veil, just place the offer down and walk away. The silence will know what to do. The end of script. Sweet dreams. you.